Alright guys, hello. So I'm just gonna give this to you guys on this broadcast. This is just me talking. I'll tell you what day it is. This is Celio. This is the 7th day of the first plasma, which is the first week in the 4th moon cycle of the 13 moon calendar. Hold on, let me just get my AC working here because it's kind of hot in this car. So I just want to talk to you guys. You know, this stuff was on my mind, and this is going to be a continuing thing that I've started to do. So just record and tell you what's on my mind. So now, and Celio is equivalent to Thursday, the last day of the weekend in a plasma, which is a week of a 13 moon calendar. The beginning of the week is always started on Friday, which is Dolly, so it goes Friday to Thursday. That's the way it works. And I like using the 13 moon, and I stick to it because it just gives me a whole different perspective of a concept of, if you want to call it time, but how to break things down. So I know, I got what I needed to get accomplished at this plasma, and then next plasma, the following week, I got stuff I can see myself getting accomplished and looking forward to other things. But anyhow, okay, AC's working because I'm talking and I don't, I don't want to drive with the windows down, even though it's very soothing. This nice temperature. Anyway, so thinking about this. Okay, what's this guy's name? His name is Edward Snowden or whatever. So maybe this is what brought all this up, the Edward Snowden thing. Not really, but just going with the concept of how the native people in this land, as they call them, the Native Americans or the Native Indians, were and are in fact the native people that we like to call the black people now. The black American, the Negro. And I'm not really sure how you even classify it now, because when you say black, you're talking about dark-skinned people, but there's dark-skinned people here and all over the world that aren't from this country, this North American country. They're from all over the place, and they will be included as black, but when you speak to them individually, they will not classify themselves as black. They'll classify themselves where they're from, whether it be the Caribbean, India, parts of the continent they call quote-unquote Africa, where we're talking about separate places like South Africa, Congo, Nigeria, Sudan, Ethiopia, Egypt, I think Gabon, maybe Tanzania, Madagascar, all these other places on that continent they quote-unquote call Africa. And then everybody assumes that the name of these people from there would be just called Africans or Afrikaans, when they're all totally different people. They have totally different cultures. Sierra Leone, French Guiana maybe. But anyway, where I'm saying, it doesn't matter. There's always some dark-skinned people from the Brazil, Cuba, Japan, China. Yes, there's dark people from those places as well. The original people. Australia, New Zealand, all over the world. Places in Europe, which is broken down to, Great Britain, Spain, France, everywhere. There's dark-skinned people, mostly the original people that were there on those lands. And you see the same thing that's happened over here. the original people on these lands are dark-skinned people, but for some reason they got classified as Native Americans or Indians, and then that gave a whole nother group of people who were portrayed as being red men or red people, which was really they're actually a mixture of, who knows. Some people say it's Asiatic people, some say it's Mongols, some people say they're mixed in from the original dark people, the pygmies, or they're a mixture of the Asians and the original people that we hear, the aboriginals, which don't really have I guess a culture or whatever. But so one of the things that the Snowden guy was talking about is how the government, which is always they, the government, is really just an individual group, a single, maybe a single digit, I don't know, but a group of people who have decided to play things closer to their desires, and were able to focus on those things and get their ideas and their desires and things met, through manipulation, of course, because the people that are working for them, they have no idea what they're doing until they realize it, and then when they realize what's going on, they all of a sudden have a conscience and want to speak out about it. But of course, the government, they have sanctioned them to be able to do this because they've okayed it, which is this thing where I'm talking about the Snowden guy. So basically the government, through the Dick Cheney administration, and maybe even before then, something that was already planned up, they decided they were going to monitor everybody because of terrorists, because of a few people who they believed and said were terrorists, even though they were doing the same thing, but they don't call it terrorism, they call it freedom, and they call it, protection, patriotism, when they're over in other countries doing the same thing. But when something happens over here, supposedly, it's terrorism. So this gave them to the right, supposedly, I guess, to go out and monitor everybody through the phone companies. And they did it illegally, but it was on a very thin line, which made it kind of legal, but it was illegal still because it infringed upon our rights as citizens, which again goes to, which I'll get to another point, which I've been talking about, is how free are we? How free are we as the people? What rights do we actually have if the government, a few group of people, can break those rules and laws and not be punished for them? You have to think. You think about that. So did that make them heroes, like the Batman, who continuously breaks laws and rules, and he's never punished for it? He's praised for it. They even talk about the controversy of the whole thing, but nothing is done. Same thing, they talk about the controversy of all the things that the government has done that's been illegal, things that you and I can't do as quote-unquote citizens, but they get away with it by putting things on paper, making rules up, making it up as they go. And who's to be held accountable for it? Nobody. Because the government is not punishable. The government cannot punish itself, and it won't. The theys. So, but this thing that's been going on, it's been going on for a long time. It is a proven method of confusion that they have perfected. They have perfected this. And a perfect example is the whole slavery system thing, about how the chattel slavery has been transformed into a more economic friendly slavery, where you're being enslaved and you don't even know it, you don't even realize it. You think that's just the way things are. And for the most part, that is the way things are, because of the system and how perfect it works. I've always said if everybody just stopped, then we could break that chain. We could break the system. But nobody wants to stop because we're dependent upon the system. It is a vicious cycle. We are dependent upon this system because we have not figured out a way to replace it. We have not figured out a way to replace it. People talk about it and speculate, well, how are we going to replace this system? But nobody wants to. Because it's imprinted in us that this is the way things are. There's nothing that we can do about it. And we have to abide by these rules and laws that are being constantly broken and misused by the same factions that created them. Right? Okay, we're going to stop there. Coming back. Okay, so as I was saying, so we all know this is a problem. We all know in some form or extent that this is a slavery system, but we don't want to admit it. We don't want to call it that because of what the term slavery refers to and what has been put in our minds about what slavery means when people talk about slavery. You know, it's the whole thing about people being in bondage, people being abused, mistreated, working for free, being whipped, chained, just a lot of blood, uneducated, all these things, right? But when you look at it, it's still the same thing. People are still being mistreated and killed and harmed, miseducated, underpaid, maybe not paid. I mean, one thing that you do have to realize about slavery is these people who were enslaved, they had room and board. They just did not feed their slaves. They didn't work them till they died because slavery is a business, right? What sense does it make to work your product till it dies? Then you don't have any more product, then you don't get the labor. Now they can say it was free labor because maybe they didn't get a wage, or maybe they didn't get a documented wage, because all those wages were all a bunch of confusion because of the money system that was in place at the time. It wasn't a money system like it is now. And the money system that we used then, it doesn't exist. They traded with commodities, with goods that was produced on the farms, most of which were owned by the original people who were here. Called Native Americans, whatnot, whatever. Because these people never gave themselves these names. The names were given to them by the ones writing the history. Because if you already knew yourself and who you are, what you are, where you came from, why would you need to name yourself or give a name to anybody if you already knew who you were? That's just like, this is like yourself. You know what I mean? You know yourself. You don't have to give a name or define that yourself to anybody because you already know who and what you are. So again, you have to look at the history and how these laws were written. Another great example of that, if you watch this movie, is called The Invention of Lying. And that's basically what happened. They just start saying whatever they wanted to say, and it became truth because they were the only ones documenting a history that they wanted to create and make for themselves. The original people didn't have to do that because they already knew it. They didn't have to write anything down because they knew everything already. There's no reason to. Why write something down when you don't forget? Why make plans for a building when you already know how to build it? Everybody knew how to do it. They were much higher thinkers than what we are now. Yes, that was my wife calling me to check on me. She always does. Love that woman. So, the slavery thing, right? So I was just thinking, it's like this. Now, like I said, now, some people don't see it that way, but some people know. And I believe what it is really the education or the information that we're getting. Because as a child, you're brought up a certain way, especially if you're going through the public education system and even a private education system. Like, there's certain things that are taught in different ones, but they say there's a difference between a formal education and like a liberal education, where things are told, where you're taught totally differently, right? So maybe a liberal education means a more free education, as far as like the information comes from real life situations and things that have actually happened and the way things actually work, as opposed to an indoctrinated system, which we call the public education system, or a formal education, is where things are broken down and told to you the way that they want you to believe them, creating different pathways and thoughts in your mind and in your brain of how things work, like a total mind control, mind altering system, which I believe is true, because there's certain little things that can be done will change your perspective on life, certain experiences that you have, but depending on how you're brought up, or what things come to you and maybe what things are supposed to be. I know for me, things began to change after I had the experience of going through a stage of drugs, and then I guess depression, and then hitting rock bottom, and then going through the reborn Christian to not believing in that system at all, to believing in something better and greater and more that was found within myself, and not for some outside deity that basically governed everything I did and knew everything I was going to do before I did it, but still allowed it to happen. So, people talk about that, and, there's a lot of things that we're learning and figuring out. But that was kind of like my way to get enlightened, so to speak. And I don't know if it was enlightened, maybe just opening different pathways in my brain, in my mind, in myself, so that I was able to see other things that were going on around me. Because I believe like the world that we're in is all being created for us. And the dominant factor is money. It's a capitalistic system. It's money, 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 money. And without that money, what do you have? Without that money, what do you have? What do you have without the money? You go to work for it. Why? Because you need it. Because if you don't have it, then you're out there. You are out there. And not to say it's a bad thing that you're out there, because some people choose not to be a part of it. And they're not. And they're okay with that. Even though other people in society will look at it as a shame. And it makes you feel a certain way if you're in that system that you don't have money. It's a very, very powerful thing. Very, very powerful thing. For, reasons already, explained. We know. But you have to get to a certain point where you're not worried about that. Where, it will come. It's still important, but it's not the most important thing in your life. Just like sex is not the most important thing in your life. or being in a relationship is not the most important thing in your life. You have to be okay with self. And I've come to grips with that. I really have. And I think that's allowed me to be able to see different things. So, like, you have to think about a lot of things. You know, Dane Calloway says you have to question everything. You know, question everything. And you do. And there's other people out there, you know what I mean, that said similar things, you know. I mean, why is it that all the so-called dark-skinned people, the heroes, they're all supposed to be ex-slaves? They're all slaves. Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, what's the other one? Nat Turner, and then, okay, so those are our slavery heroes, right? Those are the ones that they teach us in school that you have to look up to. There could have been some others, you know what I mean? But they talk about all the hardship they went through, and they were all slaves, you know what I mean? Then they talk about our martyrs, Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. They talk about those are our martyrs, and they shun Malcolm X so much, you know what I mean? Because of what he believed, they shun him so much. But then when you look at Martin Luther King, he was a Christian, but he did many unchristian things. He probably worked for the government. Probably had something in the government, which is why, you know, his family, they've only done what they've done, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like, that's all you hear about Martin Luther King. That was it. And then they don't tell you about a certain person that worked with Malcolm X, who got killed the same time he did in another country. And see, then they like to throw things in there about other people who had it worse than the slaves. They want to talk about the Holocaust and the Jewish. Then they want to talk about the Germans and how evil they were. And then they'll put in, what's that girl's name? Anne Frank. Like, she was so important. Anne Frank. What the fuck did Anne Frank ever do? She didn't do nothing. She was from wealth. And just because the Germans went there and wanted to kill all the fucking Jews, it's such a bad thing, and she's a hero. For what did she do? When supposedly there's a Harriet Tubman who went hardcore and were freeing people Underground Railroad, which I don't know if that was true or not either. A lot of things have been fabricated, but we know that a lot of stuff is fabricated, you know. And then the government will allow things to come out because they already know, they've already wrapped that up with this Snowden, and then they want to make this Snowden guy look like he's such a genius, because really and truly he was they put him in that position. They knew everything about him. They've always known everything about him. They've always known everything about us. They, whoever you want to say they is, they already know. Otherwise, why would they allow it? When you're in power, you don't allow things that are on the outside to destroy your power or your image. Because see, the government they're like ghosts. They don't exist. They don't have identities. That's why we say they. You can't identify any one particular person in the government that's making all these decisions and controlling things. They don't even know. So the confusion is a perfect confusion. Who can you blame for it? Donald Trump? Obama? Joe Biden? Nancy Pelosi? Dick Cheney? Who can you blame? And none of these people are going down for any of this stuff. They may make a few examples, but you don't even know who the fuck that person is either. They could have been a sleeper person. A sleeper. They didn't even know. So like this, This is like what I'm saying. Like, so you got people, especially black people, all worked up about other people coming in this country being so-called successful and prosperous. And that's because of how they tell the history. See, they don't tell you the history about how our people built everything. We were the ones building everything. The towns, the cities, the railroads, the roadways, all this stuff. The industrial revolution. That wasn't just a bunch of pale-faced people, Europeans coming from Europe and working in the factories and building the factories for that. Just wasn't them. That was us. They don't tell you anything about that. Those were our people because we were already here. So who built the factories? Who was the one who invented the assembly line? So they don't give you your heroes like George Washington Carver. They don't talk about that guy. He was a genius. More genius than Albert Einstein. Because who's a genius? Someone who designs things to kill people, or someone who designed things to benefit people? They tell you about Eli, what's his name? Eli guy, the guy who made the cotton gin, whatever his name is, to make it easier to make the cotton whole thing was mainstream, right? But see, they associate with cotton with slavery being bad, and it wasn't. Cotton was something that was grown by the farmers, the black farmers who already owned the land. But it was industrialized by a machine that was invented by a black person. And then you gotta look at the incandescent light bulb. They gave it to Thomas Edison when there was a black man who assisted him, supposedly, or he was the one who supposedly came up with it, with the whole idea. They don't tell you guys about, there's a guy, what's his name? Gabriel Aibo. This guy's a genius. But those are not our heroes. And there's plenty others. You know what I mean? There's plenty others. And they have been influenced. Booker T. Washington's and those guys, they've been influenced. You know what I mean? Because money is a tool. And when you're able to print your own money, then what did that make you? That makes you royalty, right? That makes you kings and queens. They say there's no more kings and queens, but it still exists. They don't call them that anymore because the term does not apply. When you're able to print your own money, then you are royalty. You are royalty. Think about it, right? So they got us all worked up about these other people coming over here. And because we have lost our identity, and everybody knows we've lost our identity, but we're trying to identify with other countries when we can't even identify with our own country because it's been taken from us. We lost the war. It's been taken from. We can't. So we shouldn't even be mad at these other people. They're bringing stuff from their land to our land. And they're being taxed on it, and we're not getting the money. The people who took over our land are getting the money for taxing foreigners for coming over onto our lands. Selling off our land, doing all these things to our land. But we can't do anything about it. One, because we don't have any rights to any of this. And we are slaves. So as slaves, you don't have any rights. That's why they can do anything they want to us. And to anybody all over the world, planet. We want to give them so much crap, so we can't even bond and unite with these people that come over here because, we're taught to be jealous of them when they're just doing what they're trying to do because shit is fucked up in their country as well. And they figure, well, if it's fucked up here, at least I can go over there and it won't be as fucked up, and I can make some money. Or whatever it is that's going on. I mean, think about it. That's why we don't have anything of our own, because our culture has been changed to fit the needs, and now it's become something called America, which doesn't represent anything about anyone. It's just a whole bunch of willy-nillys that's going on. A whole bunch of willy-nillys. There's nothing American about America. Nothing. And we want to call ourselves Americans. I think that's what the old Farrakhan was saying, when we're not even American. We are Aboriginal people. We are the original people. The ones that began it all over here. You know, we didn't sit by and just let it happen. We did fight. We did fight. I think Calloway was saying there's over 61 battles, 61 wars that we fought for our rights. But we did not win. Infiltrated, which is a tactic of war. You know, but it's okay. You know what I mean? It's okay. You know, do what you need to do. You know what I mean? Focus on yourself. And things will work out. Well, anyway, I'm mouthing off now, so I am going to end this, and I'll be back with another rant when we get the time. All right. Peace.